Britain's economy is on the brink of collapse, according to the Bank of England in London. The Bank of England is a provider of downside scenarios in the British economic model. The other day, the bank not only sharply increased the interest rate to 3%, but also scared the British people with a grim prognosis. They are facing a crisis not seen since the 1930s. We know what happened then. It was the Great Depression. The head of the financial institution in question, Andrew Bailey, shared his sad thoughts in an interview with the British television channel. He said, "We see the huge turmoil that the economy is going through today, and unfortunately it has been happening for the last 2.5 years. So it's not new, it's been happening for 2.5 years, he said. Bailey's speech could be seen as artillery preparation for the upcoming tough and unpopular measures of the British cabinet. The Sunak government, he's the new Prime Minister after Liz Truss, the Sunak government wants to curb inflation. In his first major interview with the Times of London, he described it as enemy number one. Inflation hits the poor as hard as possible. I want to stop it, he said. To balance the budget, the government needs to plug a £50 billion hole. There is only one way to do this, by cutting spending and raising taxes. The previous Prime Minister Liz Truss tried to do the opposite, resulting in a near crash of financial markets. As the governor of the Bank of England says today, we are just hours away from a complete collapse. Britain is still reeling from the horrors of the shortest reign in the country's history, that is, of Liz Truss, who reigned only 44 days. It's not without reason that the residents of the English town of Edinburgh, where every year they choose the most unpleasant character to burn his effigy on Guy Fawkes Night, this time they chose Liz Truss. She managed to multiply the already serious problems facing the United Kingdom. Indeed, that does not mean Rishi Sunak will not be in the same fire a year from now. He will have to try hard not to fall into the flames. Across Britain, businesses are now closing. Small and medium-sized businesses cannot afford inflation and skyrocketing energy bills. Preliminary projections show that if this continues, the country could lose 60% of its manufacturing. The Liz Truss government has promised to impose a price cap on electricity and gas consumption for 2 years. The new cabinet agreed to keep the cap in place until April next year. What happens after that remains to be seen. Those paying rent for space to operate their businesses want to know what to expect. There is no answer yet. To revive the real estate market during the pandemic, the then Finance Minister Rishi Sunak abolished the house and apartment purchase tax. Hundreds of thousands of Britons took advantage of this opportunity, taking out mortgages. Now, after the Bank of England rate hike, loan interest rates are starting to rise as well. At the same time, the Sunak government is frantically looking for something else to put in the tax net. Electric cars are next in line. Owners of battery-powered cars are now exempt from tolls, but the cabinet plans to take that right away. When the scenarios for the rolling blackouts this winter were being written, the green energy debate seemed to take a backseat. Citing the intense focus on domestic affairs, which is indeed true, Prime Minister Sunak stubbornly refused to go to the UN climate conference in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. His cabinet member and former Liz Truss deputy Theresa Coffey called the conference just a gathering of people in Egypt. Sunak dramatically changed his plans after his main rival in the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson, gathered in Sharm el-Sheikh. The weakness of the position of the new Prime Minister is that he tries not to make the slightest mistake for fear of repeating the unfortunate course of his predecessors who left the Prime Ministership prematurely. Global warming or not, Britain, like the rest of Europe, is enjoying an unexpectedly warm autumn this year, allowing the warming season to be pushed back for a while. The European Union, exceeded its own target, filling its warehouses by an average of 95%, writes The Economist. Because the storage facilities are full, there's no room for liquid fuel tankers to unload. About 30 of them are forced to drift into European waters. The downtime of these vessels costs a whopping $400,000 a day, so traders at some point were willing to even pay to have the gas taken away from them. Apparently, after this wave, the British government made a political decision to ban imports of Russian liquefied natural gas from January 2023. But don't get your hopes up. The International Energy Agency believes that in the event of a complete cessation of natural gas deliveries from Russia and an increase in demand in Asia markets in the second half of the next year, Europe will face energy shortages, and then things will be really difficult. Even with the electricity price cap in place, independent experts estimate that almost a fifth of the UK population will fall below the so-called energy poverty line. These people spend more than 10% of their income on bills, electricity and heating, the most vulnerable of whom will literally be forced to choose between food and heating. A poll carried out on behalf of Sky News showed that 25% of Britons already buy food on credit, while more than a third complain about the difficulty of paying their energy bills. The Economist predicts more protests in Britain as cold weather sets in. Britain is facing a winter of strikes. They started with the railroads. The RMT Rail Union staged its biggest strike in decades this summer and will continue in November. Rail strikes make the situation worse, but the effects are not as sensitive now because many people are now used to working remotely from home. The real chaos will occur when a significant percentage of workers from other sectors join the strikes. The first concern is for medical workers. Unions have already started polling nurses and ED staff on whether to join potential protests. Britain's national healthcare system is already collapsing before our eyes. There are around 130,000 job vacancies, a huge shortage of specialists, not least because of Brexit. In an effort to find additional sources to patch up the budget so that social spending is not cut to the bone, the Sunak government intends to raise the tax on energy companies' surplus profits from 25 to 30%, with the possibility of extending it into 2028. Partners on the continent are acting the same way. The European Union has imposed a solidarity levy of 33% on the surplus profits of hydrocarbon companies from 2022 to 2023. Earlier, it was reported that the British cabinet is considering reducing defence spending. An approximate figure was even named. It was reportedly planned to cut by £2.5 billion sterling, roughly how much was spent on military and technical aid to Ukraine. The UK Ministry of Defence is refusing to comment on this debate. Previous Prime Ministers Johnson and Truss promised to increase military spending to 3% of GDP by 2030. Rishi Sunak is silent on this. Unlike his predecessors, the new British Prime Minister Sunak is not prone to manifestos and drastic actions. His first decision was to move the date of announcing the new budget from October 31st to November 17. This gave them time to think about the difficult decisions and calm the markets a bit. Sunak has made it an ambitious goal to restore voter and business confidence in his cabinet's actions. He said, "I'm fully aware that confidence has been drastically undermined in recent weeks, even in recent months. Trust is not something that is simply given, it has to be earned. We want to achieve this by being honest and telling the truth, dealing with the issues that interest people," he said. The young British Prime Minister's fine words have yet to be matched by any action. Circumstances are not in his favour, and with the impending recession, there cannot be ideal solutions in principle. The question is whether he can find the least painful ones. And this is translated for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.